Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, non-binary, distinguished guests, welcome to Ridiculous, the Life of a Clown.
My name is William Hall, which is different than who I am. That's what I call myself. What do? I find a way through. One of my favorite recent phrases is I'm a performer and teacher of amusing truths, which is slightly
nice.
Pretentious, but it's all right.
No, that's nice. So your background, to my understanding, is heavily made up of improv. A large chunk of your training and your performance over the last how many ever years has been improv related. Is that right?
Yeah. No. My formal training for a while I was a double major, theater and psychology. Then I had transferred to a better theater school, and I majored in theater, Boston University. And it's kind of funny because, being silly and making people laugh came relatively easy to me. It seemed to. I'll probably eat those words at some point in my life. But being dramatic was the challenge for me. And so all of my training in college was how to be a dramatic actor. When I got out of college, I found something ironic. I found that people really respect dramatic actors, but there's not much work for them. People don't respect comic actors, but there is work for them, and there's people will pay to laugh, but they won't respect you very much, but they'll hire you. It's funny.
So what drew you to theater itself in the first place?
Well, I was socially awkward, of course. I think that's a lot of people in theater find it's easier to study theater. Theater shows you how to act, and you get a part to play, and so you know how to act. So I was socially awkward. I was also bad at English, and my dad said, "Son, I think you would enjoy a drama class, and you could take that instead of an English class." And turned out he was right on all of it.
And that from someone who has written and published a fairly successful book, which is The Playbook.
Yeah, the Playbook, Improv Games for Performers. Yeah, it's fun.
So, drama in.
So let me take you from there. So then I graduated from college in Boston, and I wanted to do new theater. New York was sort of dark and punishing. LA was not theater, nothing close to theater. It was something else. So this was my view at the time. So I moved to San Francisco because there were these new voices. Sam Shepard, the Magic Theater, John O'Keefe. These voices were so strong and vibrant, and I moved out here to do that. And along the way, I got married. That marriage did not last very long, and I went into depression. And while I was saving my money to go back to New York to suffer as an actor, this group of Commedia guys asked me to play with them, and I saw what they were doing, and it was completely asinine, and very self-important. And it was Commedia dell'arte, 15th century stuff. It's like not around anymore. There's no one's hiring Commedia players, but they were fun to hang out with. They were fun guys, and so I decided I could hang out with these guys. There are worse things to do than that. And then it was just like, let's do what I really know how to do, is just do stupid slapstick humor, big character driven fart slapstick humor, and just playing with other guys and making the world laugh. I grew up with three brothers, so the idea of a bunch of guys, goofing off to make people laugh seemed okay. And it was we were a testosterone force to deal with, and it was really fun to be in a group that sort of owned its own strength. It seems ironic today in 2017 to talk about a bunch of young white guys owning their strength, but that's what it felt like at the moment. And for a guy who was in depression, it was really a great place to go. Soon after we started doing, I started working with that group, and we started creating our own Commedia plays. We got asked to audition for a movie called The Right Stuff about the astronauts. and we were asked to audition for the part of the press corps to follow the astronauts around. And then we got cast.
And you were asked as a group to audition.
Yeah, we were asked as a group to audition.
What was the name of that group? Did you have?
Yeah, that was I Fratelli Bologna.
Okay.
It was the Brothers of Bologna, Fratelli Brothers Bologna, town in Italy, or cheap lunch meat. Works either way.
So I don't want to jump ahead too far. I'm glad you brought up Commedia, because that is the other thing I think of when I think of you, aside from improv. So I'm glad I'm not completely 100% off base on your background. When you were doing Commedia, what kind of roles were you focusing on? What was it that fell to you?
Well, these I'm tempted to use a word that might not be appropriate. These guys that were in the I Fratelli group said, well, every new guy who comes in has to play the girl. You're the new guy. And so in the first Commedia I did with them, I played Isabella. In the Commedias, the young ingenue is almost always called Isabella because of the actress that is so well known for playing it back in the day. So I played Isabella, but I also played Leandro, her love interest, and the two of them were always looking for each other and just missing each other. And they were both very in love and very full of themselves and very committed to love, and not terribly smart. So it was really lovely to play those sort of the Commedia characters. Like all clowns, I think, have appetites, and they hunger for something, and they're unafraid and unrestrained most of the time by social convention, and just go for it. So that was the beautiful thing about the Commedia, is like getting into this mask, getting into that character, and letting it drive the action. So
this seems kind of a non sequitur, but what were you doing for a living back then? How were you getting by when you were doing Commedia, presumably not professionally, when you first got to San Francisco?
Yeah, I just want to note, you say Commedia and I say Commedia, and I think that's fine, with whatever it is. So we'll just agree that we'll have our own words for it. So, when I first got to San Francisco, I was making my living as an actor and doing temp work. And it was that movie, doing that movie, The Right Stuff, that broke me out of temp work. So my last regular go to an office job was in 1981.
Wow, that's great.
But it was always sort of finding a profession, finding the money. So it was always about looking for gigs. Back in those days, there was a union called the Screen Extras Guild, and they used to film a lot of TV shows and movies in San Francisco. In fact, at the time, your listeners may be interested in this, everyone used to say, oh, you should have been here back in the days of the streets of San Francisco. Oh, there was work, everybody worked, and you could get a line, you could get your A card, your SAG card. But you would call in like the night before, an automated phone line, and this back in the days when you had to, punch all those numbers. And if you got through and you were the right type, you would be called to a movie set, and you would work all day long. And I still remember it was $79 to be on set all day. And you had to make a choice about whether or not you were going to go and try to get a part and make your get on screen, or whether you wanted to come back for a second day. Because at the end of every day, they would gather all the extras together, and they point to people and they say, okay, we've seen you, and we've seen you, so you're not back. And if they point to you and said, they've seen you, you say, no, they didn't. I had my back and I had my ball cap on, but you really didn't see me. And they say, oh, you come back tomorrow. So you learn how to kind of be in the movies or in the TV shows, but to kind of hide.
That sounds amazing.
So you could get another $79.
Yeah.
So you can make some more.
How was that in terms of money in 81, 82?
Well, all we were really concerned with at that time is just making the rent.
Yeah, feeding yourself.
And I had a VW Bug back in the day, and so it was, that cost us nothing to maintain. But we didn't have any electronics to buy. I didn't have a phone to maintain. I didn't have all this electronic equipment. So.
And that's before it was insane to live in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, well it was not inexpensive, but it was it seemed doable as opposed to now.
So, from the right stuff, going forward, what was your next major landmark in your career?
Oh God, I don't know. I guess it all depends on what hat you put on it. You know, we did as a group. We did a bunch of different things from working at Disneyland. Disneyland hired us. They auditioned us. That was crazy. They on the audition weekend when we went down to Disneyland, we were backstage at Disneyland on our stilts doing a stilt bit because we'd done the Us Festival and we decided for an Us Festival, you know, the Steve Wozniak thing. We wanted to entertain as many people as possible, so we looked at doing stilts. Yeah. So we were down at Disneyland, and this kid came out of a limo and came over and sort of shaking our hands, and it was Michael Jackson. He was backstage at Disneyland, so that was kind of fun. But you know, we got hired by Disneyland to do a bunch of stuff, and we had some friends out at San Francisco State, Larry Eilenberg, and he called us out to do some lectures and talk about what we were doing. And people were pretty interested in how this group of guys could create a theater company out of nothing, you know, just sort of like agreeing to do it. We didn't have a space, we didn't have a theater, and yet we put together our own shows and produced them.
So where were you guys performing?
Well, Project Artaud, we did there, and they had a little space downstage called Studio Eremos, and we did the Neighborhood Playhouse up on Potrero Hill. Yeah, we kind of would find a lot of places, and then we kind of fell in with a group of theater ne'er-do-wells on 9th Street near Folsom. Marcia Crosby and Joe Bullock, and they were running a little theater called the Climate Theater, and so that was a good arrangement with them, and they really, you know, we could go in there, but it was a tiny little house. I don't know, 50 seats if that. So we would go in there and do stuff.
Where was that physically?
It was physically on 9th.
Just off Folsom?
Just off Folsom.
So that Climate stayed the Climate up through just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but it wasn't. Not
different people.
Not the space.
Okay.
The space changed. The space became selling furniture or something.
All right, because the Climate Theater that existed a few years ago was in the same general area on 9th, just off Folsom, in a tiny little room way
Upstairs.
up above.
Yeah, but this was a little, you know, one of those little shops that used to be a transmission shop or something.
I wonder if there was any lineage between the old Climate and the new. So who was in I Fratelli Bologna?
Right. So, yeah. So the history starts before that. And they were called La Familia Bologna, the family Bologna. We had men and women in it, but I wasn't there. So Richard Duppel contacted me and said, "Come in and get at this." And I was doing extra work with Richard and hanging out all day, talking and just amusing ourselves. So that was kind of how we found each other, or some of us found each other. And he said, "Check this out." And so it was Richard Duppel. Richard, Drew. No, not Drew. It was Richard, John, Chris, Ed. No, not Ed. Jack Tate and me. And then when we got the movie, we brought back in 2 members from La Familia, which is Drew and Ed Holmes. And then we became 7 guys.
And that's Drew Letchworth.
Yeah.
Drew is the only other person that I know in my head was a member of your Bologna back then. Mm-hmm. So Fratelli Bologna is something very different now.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us about that. What is Fratelli Bologna?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So we're doing this slapstick, lowbrow humor that people are willing to pay for. So people start asking us to come. And they said, bring this thing to our parties. People wanted us to do parties. And so we would say, well, what's the theme of the party? And then we'd create characters for that party. And then we'd come in and mix it up. I'm answering that question, but it's going to take a second. So we found this employment opportunity, being hired by party planners to be a roving band of entertainment at parties, to bring our energy, our sort of character committed and male energy into these parties. And we would create characters and find costumes or make costumes or rent costumes and show up and just be pretty outrageous. We called ourselves Party Insurance because when you hired us to be at a party, something was going to happen. No one would go home bored. And so slowly, we got hooked up with a beautiful company called a Global Business Network through Richard's connection that Richard had through his spouse, and they were doing scenario planning about the future, and it was all reasonably dry. It was all very exciting, and it came out of Dutch Shell about how do you plan for the future and contingencies, and what are the major factors for the way the future is going to move. And they would had this way of looking at it, and then they would create the 4 possible futures: if this happened, if that happened, if that didn't happen, if that did happen. And then they would create these pictures of the worlds, and we worked with them to create characters that were in those worlds. So suddenly we were in these conferences on a stage before, 1,000 people, sort of doing monologues and scene work that was based on these possible futures. And we saw this glimpse at how this crazy, big, stupid clowning work that we were doing could fit into a world and be sort of relevant in a different way to the business world and pay pretty well. And so we started looking more and more into that area. I remember the day my agent called me, Craig Jones, the amazing Craig Jones at Actors Exchange. Used to be an actor, and he got into the acting business because he thought agents didn't treat actors well enough. And he called me up. He says, "I got this job offer for you, William, but I don't think you want it. It's like, Ron Popeil doing his, spiels." He said, "You'd be at a conference and at a trade show, an exhibit floor, and you would pitch some high-tech solution to the crowd walking by." And I said, "That does not sound like anything I want to do." They said, "How much does it pay?" And he told me how much it pays. I said, "Tell me more." And so we started doing these 2 things where we were a theatrical element for consulting groups. We became the theater in residence for Dr. John Kao and the Idea Factory, and we did a lot of work with him, sort of creating events that were provocative enough for companies, company events, to spark strong conversation with a strong facilitator. We even went to the World Economic Forum and did some work there with that. So we're doing that kind of work, and at the same time we're also doing this trade show work where it's using our skills, some kind of street theater, strong engagement. I'm not afraid to look at you, engage you in a strong way. Then you add to that around 1986, we started with I started looking at Keith Johnstone's work, Impro, and this different idea about improv and theater, improvisational theater, which is different than improv. This thing. And then when you study those skills, then Silicon Valley started saying, teach us those skills, those skills of how you collaborate together. I remember we went to Boston. We were on the same bill as the amazing Karamazov brothers, and we did the first, 5 to 7 minutes of Hamlet, the play, and we really rehearsed it. We had a director. We got it strong, and then we stopped and we talked about the time that it would take and the resources that it would take to produce the entire play, and then said, well, now let's do some improvisation. And we did some improvisation, and we said, here's the breakdown for that, and we used that as our opening gambit to talk about the nature of teams that form quickly, have enough common language and a foundation of belief or principles to be able to create very quickly.
See, I struggle myself constantly with trying to form teams, trying to form partnerships, trying to find people.
You and I talked about it recently, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. It's tough.
I've been trying to build a show teaching consent to like pre-K, early elementary school kids. I finally hooked up with Ginny Johnson because she wants to do some puppetry. So I changed the show so there's puppetry in the show. So I found someone to work with. But it's been almost a year and a half that I've been trying to find someone to produce this show with.
Well, let me tell you, in the years that the Bologna brothers were this male vortex, we fought all the time. We that sort of testosterone we didn't save that for someone else. We exploded on each other. So we fought all the time. We had the saying that we were And we always had our resignation in our pocket, and we really went at it. And sometimes it was physical, and we'd slug it out with each other. We wrestle, I guess, would be more of it. But to answer the other question is, now what we do is we do three things. We do those trade show presentations. So we work with big companies like HPE. We'll work with a team, create the messaging, help focus the messaging, sort of make it, find a creative approach, and then put together a script and go through that whole approval process. And then we'll fly to Las Vegas or Hanover, Germany, and we'll do that script every day for 3 to 5 days, several times a day, and try to attract people over to engage with that company. We also do training. We've been doing some interesting training in Silicon Valley, and we've started a series at the public library. And we also do one-on-one executive coaching. So those three areas.
What is the public library series?
Well, my partner Carla Hatley and I decided that we wanted to start working together and wanted to create a partnership with the public library. Carla's been working for years through Fratelli Bologna as working with their literacy program, and from time to time she would bring in actors and read a play out loud for a group of adult learners who are learning how to read, and it's very rewarding. It feels like it feels so good. It's great to go to a party and make people who are eating shrimp laugh, but there's something else about making a difference in the world in a different way. So Carla's been pioneering that effort. And then she and I hatched this plan. Mostly she hatched this plan to start doing some workshops there on improvisation and storytelling and writing. And we've had several of them so far, and we're scheduling more. Very successful. So we're thrilled.
So how much, you mentioned improv again a couple of times there, how much of your performance life is improv? How much of what you're doing when you are in front of an audience is dependent on those skills?
Well, everything. I do a lot of scripts, and I do a lot of corporate teaching. I work for a couple of companies and travel around the world delivering high performance communication training or communication, powerful conversations, management, leadership workshops. Recently, I was in Singapore and Bangalore working for a couple of companies and delivering this training, and that's I know what I'm going to teach all day long. But you've got to be in that moment. You've got to be sort of right in that moment in order for them to know that you're with them, because they'll try to leave because they got phones and other things going on, and that's true for a training, for a coaching, and for a trade show. It's like, how do you let them know that you've got skin in the game and you're open and vulnerable and here and you see them, and it's about transforming their lives in some way. So improvisation is critical. It's all a conversation. One of the reasons I wanted to do this with you now live is because of the body language. It's so much better. It's so much better.
I've done this off Skype once, and it was a lovely interview. But not having the person there to look at and talk to and directly connect with is definitely a hindrance to communication.
It's funny. I teach a fair amount of improv, and when you're in the corporate world teaching improv, people are afraid of it, mostly because they see, comedy improv. Plenty of that on TV and around, which is great. But they say, I can never do improv. And it's so funny when you point out that the conversation you're having right now is an improvisation, and we're all doing just fine. So, the reality is everybody in life is really good at improvisation. It changes when you're being looked at by a group of people, and there's expectation of some kind of entertainment delivery.
And it's the expectation. It is my sense of humor.
Fear.
It comes out in one very specific way that isn't very performative. I like to tell people outrageous lies and make them believe them, and then when they say really, just go, no, not really. That's not a real thing. That was a joke. That entertains me tremendously. That's not very performative. So when it came time to become
I don't know. Magicians do that all the time.
They do. But I
right.
don't have the dexterous skills nor the patience to develop them. But when it came time to become a clown, that was and still is to some degree my biggest hurdle is the improvisational aspect of clown. I was watching Amelia Van Brunt do the Whaling Show with Ross Travis, and she kind of epitomized that form of clown, that harassing the audience as they're coming in late, and picking individuals and instances and responding to what was happening in that moment. And while I was sitting there watching, I'm like, this is not a skill set that I have. And having been at this for over 10 years now and in my 40s, I felt real lack not having that. Another place that I feel I lack is as an actor. So where do you go to improve that skill? Is improvisation?
No.
It's straight. It's traditional.
Yeah, it's funny because we at Bats Improv, which I founded with a couple of other brave souls, and we get a lot of people who want to be on that stage, and might be good at improvisation, but if you don't have stage skills, it's going to be really hard to hold your own on that stage. And stage skills are taught in classes, and they're taught by other actors and directors in performance. And the only way you get that, I think, is one of those two ways. But ultimately, you have got to do some scripted plays, and you've got to learn that stuff. That's about how to hold an audience, and about how to hold for laughs, and how to be on stage and share a stage with other people.
I've definitely found in watching the hundreds of clowns that I've had the privilege to watch in the last 10 years, and learning clown with a number of people who'd studied traditional acting, they just made better clowns. Their commitment to the emotion of the moment was much stronger than someone who came into clown from another background. I felt at that point that acting was a kind of lying, and clowning was more honest. But that said, I think having that background and those skills makes you a much better clown than if you don't. Than someone like myself. Thinking of someone like Kelsey Custard, who was trained by Patty Gallagher, and just her sense of commitment emotionally is just amazing.
There's something else that Kelsey has, and that's really invaluable to anyone's career. She's delightful.
She's so sweet.
You could tell she likes life. She enjoys life. A smile is never far away from her. When you're in her presence, it won't be long before you see her smile. So there's a light coming from her that is naturally attractive. So
Lou Scacchiola as well. The exact same thing. Just an effusiveness and an inner glow, and just this sense of intense joy and absolutely no fucks to give about anything that would hinder that directly.
Right, and balance that with a commitment to character and commitment to creating a theatrical moment for an audience. And you've got a winning combination. We say at Bats all the time, if you want to be a great improviser, you can study the skills of improvisation, but ultimately, if people like playing with you, you'll always be in shows and you will improve. If you have great skills but nobody likes playing with you, that's a tougher way to go. Yeah.
I think I fall more into that latter category.
Because it's easy to study the skills, but it's a social interpersonal dynamic that...
Mm-hmm. Well, and it is the social interpersonal dynamic that I fall down on. I come from a grumpier stock than most, and excessively outspoken. So let's talk about Bats.
Yeah. If you want to find some really fun improv games, I want to encourage your listeners to go to my site where I list a lot of games. It's improvgames.com. I was lucky enough to get that domain, and I try to post a game or an activity at least once a week. I've got over 300 in the book,
wow,
which you can order on the website, by the way, either a digital version or a print-on-demand version, and available for schools. Or just look at the games there, because it's really the freedom of playing a game without trying to win, just about creating something, is really quite lovely. So in 1986, my friend Rebecca Stockley introduced me to this stuff, this Keith Johnstone stuff, and I'd always hated improv. improv in my actor training was horrible. They were teaching me that Ibsen was a poet, and that the words were sacrosanct. Your job was to make the words come alive. The relationship of the vowels to the consonants, the meter of the line. We were studying these things, and then they say, "So improvise the moment before. Let's improvise the moment before." And I said, "You've got to be friggin' kidding me! No, you can't tell me it's a poet. He's a poet, and then you want me to improvise that. I can't hold those two realities." So I couldn't. I thought it was crap. But then Rebecca taught me this other kind of improv, which is about sort of letting things come out, just letting your story come out, and it wasn't so prescriptive or so directed that way. And I read the book Impro, and I think it deeply changed my life. I remember reading the section on status, and the idea that if you look at someone, look away, and then glance back at them to see if they're still looking, and do that a couple times, that it creates a kind of character that is very different from looking at someone and just holding their eyes. And I went, they didn't teach me this in acting school. Why didn't they teach me this in acting school? And there's a bunch of stuff in that particular chapter that I just went, it's so practical for creating character. I remember we were working at the Bologna Brothers, and there were 4 of us at this time, and we were doing a gig, and I think we bought in an ACT costume sale 4 red jackets, like waiter jackets, short jackets. And we decided we were going to go do this gig, and we were going to be waiters. And that's kind of all we decided. We painted some big red cheeks, some crazy eyebrows, and fake mustaches on our lips. And then we went, because we just read this status thing. Well, we said, well, let's create a status in between the waiters. And it was like, okay, who's going to be number 1? Okay, John, good. Who's going to be number 2? All right, Richard, who's going to be number 3? Drew, okay. And I'll be number 4, fine. And we said, now we know what the relationship is, and all we have to do, we don't have to write anything. All we have to do is play that relationship. Number 1 talks to number 2 talks to number 3, and number 3 talks to number 4. And we sort of knew it. And it was hysterical. It was inspired. Time went away. We were in these characters. Number 4, I could get away with anything because I didn't have to be responsible. Number 2 would be responsible. And I'd do something, and number 2 would be punished. And then number 3 would be punished. And it would go up the line, and then it would come down the line. Number 1 would give a compliment to number 2, tell the men they're working really well. And 2 would say, of course, sir. And 2 would turn to number 3 and say, you're doing okay. And number 3 would turn to me and slap me. So, and that became, oh yeah, that's obvious, because it goes down the line, and it changes. So that book changed everything. And we got Rebecca come down from Seattle and teach a workshop on that, first to the Bologna Brothers, and we just loved it. And then we decided to organize a larger workshop, and we did. And we attracted a lot of people. Larry Pizzoni from the Pickle Family Circus was in that workshop. A lot of great people, a lot of actors and clowns in the Bay Area. And that show we did was sold out. And I remember being so irritated. The Bologna Brothers were creating our own comedy. And we would fight in our studio. We'd fight to make something funny. And we'd work on it over and over and over to make it funny. And here we'd done no preparation. The audience had laughed themselves silly all night long, and they wouldn't leave the theater. You know it's a good night in the theater when the audience just doesn't want to leave. They stand there and talk to each other. So it was one of those mind-shifting, mind-bending moments where I went, there's something remarkable in this. And just the playfulness, being on stage in this playful state. Improvisation has been called a drug, and a lot of people talk about it this way. Once they get hooked on it, they find a way to do more.
So, let's jump back to Commedia for a second.
Right. How's the interview going for you? Am I talking too much? Because I can talk.
You're talking pretty much the exact right amount.
All right.
As long as you allow me to be a bad interviewer and jump in on occasion, then we're great. Commedia. So, you talked about how improv is a fundamental skill in what you do, and a fundamental skill as a performer, especially as a clown. At least that's how I took what you said, whether or not those were exactly your words. Commedia. A big part of the dogma when I was learning clown was learning, at least experiencing Commedia, and working with masks and working in those characters.
I just finished doing a mask workshop, a 5-day intensive, where I taught people how to make masks and then how to perform in masks, and it was so gratifying to play in that arena again. I felt so much gratitude towards the Fratelli Bologna gang at back in the 80s that taught me everything that I know there. But mask is part of all actor training, but we don't see a lot of mask shows. Clown is one of the last places where we still see mask. You put on that nose, and everything is different. You're no longer there's a feeling like you are someone else, and you are.
That's lovely. Of course, you guys can't see it, but William has transformed dramatically.
Yeah, I put on a little red nose and some fake glasses that have fake eyes in them.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to continue the conversation.
What character did you do in the Commedia? Who were you?
I feel so bad that I don't remember the names of the characters.
Oh,
but I did the one that was obviously me. The belly and the groin, the food and sex appetite.
Well,
goblin.
That combination could fit for a couple of them. I mean, the Pantalone often has.
Okay, I don't think it was Pantalone. I think because that's the name that comes to my mind, and I don't think I'm right.
Capitano?
Definitely not Capitano. I did Capitano, but maybe it was Pantalone. Is Pantalone somewhat goblin-like in his?
Well, they're played
in his
in
mask. I mean, in his physical aesthetics. For me, it was all guts and groin, and I enjoyed playing that character very much, and it definitely holds over into the clown that I became. What I discovered working through Commedia. I realized after a long time that I work better as a number one than a number two. Mm-hmm. While the number two is the funny character who gets the punchlines, I'm funnier as a number one. I'm funnier as an authority figure, as a not to imply I am, but a more Jackie Gleason-like character.
Well, you need a strong straight man, and it's so hard in comedy duos. Like the straight man doesn't get any credit for setting up that laugh. That everyone looks at the guy who got the laugh and says, "Oh, he's so funny," but he wouldn't be as funny without the counterbalance of the straight man setting it up. So it's a really, and it's groups of duos have broken up in the past over this issue.
Over who gets to have the laugh,
who gets
or perceived as having the laugh,
right?
But even in my solo work, I developed a number two clown when I was, trying to figure out who I was, and it was more of a silent clown, and it was still, it had the belly but not the groin. Mm-hmm. It was much more innocent, and I don't play a good innocent because it's not true to who I am. I mean, yeah, there is a wounded child behind a great deal of what I do in my life, but in reality,
there's a wounded child behind everybody.
Yeah.
For God's sakes, it's all fear. We're all covering up. We're all trying to put on some mask, some face to get through the world.
And I think that's why I had to abandon that character, because it wasn't layered. It wasn't representative of who I was as a whole. I monologue. I come out, I monologue, I take off my clothes and do my little dance, and that's my killer act. That is the act that lays the house down.
You just need a strong finish.
It's got one.
Like a French film. That's all you need. Strong finish.
But yeah, I was so whoever that was, whoever the little he is a low status, though I play a higher status character. He's a low status Commedia character. I think he's a servant, possibly.
Arlecchino?
No, not
Puccinella?
Puccinella, thank you.
Yeah.
Punch.
Yeah, Punch and Judy.
Punch was the person that fit more for me, because Punch, again, in relation to the characters below him. I mean, he's not the lowest status character.
There's so many experts on Commedia, so you say that as if it's an absolute, but in our troupe, our Puccinella was pretty low down there. He was pretty at the bottom of the base, and he was John X. Hart played him. He's muscular, strong, but thick. So he was dangerous, but also sweet as could be. and easily led. And yeah, so I
It
don't.
sounds much more layered than I ever got in the brief time that we played with it. But I also think of Punchinella as the Punch and Judy puppets, and
Yeah.
and those stories in which he's violent and vulgar and dumb, and trying to physically enforce his will on the world around him, and usually getting paid back in the end, does he not? He receives to a degree what he puts out into the world.
Most of the Commedias have a kind of the way we see them now have that. What you put out comes back. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about creating work. I don't know if these questions apply in terms of improvisation, but in general,
Here's the use of improvisation. It's good in the clowning work, and it's good in the world. And this is influenced by my work with Jeff Raz when he was the director of the Clown Conservatory. Improvisation is really useful for creating work. So in the studio, like, let's improv for a while and see if we can't find it. Let's take these chairs and play with these chairs and see if we can't find the bit. It's a different way to work. It's finding it on your feet with the physical material, as opposed to sitting down at a desk and putting your head up and going, I wonder what I could do with a chair. Two valid approaches, but for the clown, I doing it. So one, it's about finding new work. Secondly, it's about how to keep your work fresh. I mean, if you're in a show like Kelsey, for example, you would do hundreds of shows over the course of a couple of years, and how do you keep it fresh? Not just for yourself, but for the audience. And the third use of improvisation is, what do you do when things don't go well? It's funny, I was teaching improv to a business here in San Francisco recently, and I used that same list. And I said, this is the reference for clowns, and I said, I think it's relevant to workers in an office too. It's about how do you brainstorm when you're creating something new. Improvisation has great tools for brainstorming and collaboration. How do you keep it fresh for you? And what do you do when the plan doesn't go the way it should? You've got to improv around it. So I think improv offers that. There's another kind of clowning where there isn't no real material, in a sense, or just basic ideas, and you go out and you play with an audience. And that's exciting, and that's risky.
And the hardest. I mean, for me, I think to many people, the one that requires the least physical preparation. You're not memorizing lines. You're not pulling out props or hauling things to the theater. It requires the most skill, at least in my experience. It requires the most skill to just go and be in a playful space, while still under the expectation that you're going to provide humor, that you're going to uplift, that you're going to bring them together as a group. What I was asking though was, when you're creating new work, how do you know you're not in front of an audience? When you're creating new work, what is your litmus for knowing the work is good?
Well, this is the thing, right? Drama is so much easier because they don't make a sound that you can say it worked. A silent audience is great. There's one element of drama that it works when the audience is completely silent. Like, no one is moving, no rustling, no folding of arms, no coughing. That you can feel that the audience is completely with you, and they're right in with you, and it's intimate, and they're right on the edge of their seats. But with humor, if they don't laugh, it's only funny to you. And plenty of comics and people laugh at their own jokes, and it's and if they're the only ones laughing, it's time to rewrite that material or rework it in a different way. So,
or find a different audience.
Yeah. So it all depends on the audience. It's just your best guess. But there is something interesting. An audience can often train a clown to be stupider. With their laughter, they can lead a clown to kind of sort of stupider and more asinine and even sort of self-destructive behavior. So it's interesting that as artists, we've got to maintain that we're there to do something. We're not just there to dance monkey dance. We're not there just for their entertainment. There's got to be something else going on.
Okay, so more esoteric question.
Yeah.
Looking back at what influences you as an artist, TV, films, theater, music, what are the things that influenced the clown and performer that you became?
Well, it's just too friggin' cliche. Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, the Three Stooges. I love that team comedy, the Marx Brothers, and that just stupidity of that, and their ability to just sort of muscle through whatever social thing was happening. The Marx Brothers were just incredible that way, and their diversity, their stuff. Of course, as you read about them, if you haven't read Harpo Speaks, that is so remarkable. And Harpo's daughter came to Bats one night, and I met her because I was working the audience before the show and just going out and chatting people up, and it was really just it was a magic moment for me because he's just so. Anyway, so those things. Jerry Lewis just passed away, and I just think about some of his early work with Dean in the casinos, and his early club stuff was just so crazy insane, and Dean was able to be the thing that held him down that he can come back to and bounce off of. I just love that stuff. Soupy Sales, I love that stuff. Later I Jacques Tati, just that the artistry of Jacques Tati didn't make me laugh out loud the way some other comedy does, but Jacques Tati is just delightful to watch because it's just not verbal. I get so tired of people who want to be verbal all the time. It's one of the things I like about clowns is it's just it's physical, and we're trying to get past the prefrontal cortex. We don't want it to be a head game. I don't want to be in your head. I want to be in your heart. I want to be in your gut. I want to be in your groin. I want to be in your ass. I want to be somewhere else. I want it to go past into some kind of human connection that way.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's all very wonderful. I think we covered everything, but we didn't really talk much about Bats. We have said Bats a lot, but we haven't said what it stands for.
Bats is a remarkable thing. When we started doing, when we put the program together, we started with this format called theater sports. Which is,
and what does BAT stand for?
It doesn't stand for anything right now.
Oh.
Back in the day, it stood for Bay Area Theater Sports. We had some consultants come in, and they wanted us to change our name to Comedy Improv, right? Because that's what we do, and that's how people know us. They said at the time, and the company just roared up. The remarkable we so many things to talk about here that are interesting. We started doing theater sports, which people see it and they say they get it, but two teams of improvisers essentially competing against each other for scores from Olympic-style judges. It can get reduced to game theater where you're just doing, sort of silly games or kind of theater games. But in improv in general, there's the every man for himself. So there is this sort of competition to get on stage. So Keith designed it so everyone's on their own team. So you know who's on your team. You're not competing with those guys. And it can be quite nervous to be up there and exciting. So what if you could take a break between each group? So that's why you had two groups. One group would get up there, you know your people, you're working with your people, and then you get to sit and relax and kind of bring your heart rate back down and come back to yourself. And in order to make it work, he was inspired by professional wrestling, which is all fake anyway. And the scores don't matter. That line might sound familiar to you. So the scores are just to give the audience a sense of narrative for the evening to take the pressure off of the performers. So Keith told us at the beginning, he said, if you do this right, you'll have your own theater. And of course now we're in a 200-seat theater at Fort Mason with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge, a staff of 8, and a theater that pays all of its performers for the company that are on for Friday and Saturday night. So you tell me another improv company that does pure improv that pays all their performers. I'd love to hear about it. It's extremely rare. We built that company with two things. One is a nonprofit, so nobody owns it. if the early days, if I tried to own it and called it William Hall Sports, that's mine, it's mine, it would never have grown to what it is. Because it's a nonprofit, people come into it and they can feel a sense of ownership because it's open. Come get on the board, come get involved, come take a class, get involved. So lots of people brought their best energy into it. The other thing that's quite remarkable about it is performers have to wait until a playwright writes a play, and then a theater decides that they're going to do it, and they hire a director, and the director has to have auditions. So in improv, you're the casting director, you're the writer, you're the choreographer, you're the dramaturg, you're everything. So we built the company for the company to have a lot of power. So that company at Bats Improv is very influential on the artistic direction of Bats. And for 31 years, we've operated with internal artistic directors who step up. But the artistic director really just coordinates the focus of the group. Like, what are we going to do this month? What are we going to do? We just finished doing 1001 Arabian Nights. That was a really fun format to do as an improv.
I've never heard of that before. That's great.
Yeah, it's terrific. So we can do anything we can think of. So it's a remarkably successful theater company, and it's in large part because I think of this the very first steps we took. We never expected people to hang out and be a member of the company for 31 years. We thought people would come and be there for a couple of years. Once you're in our company, you can't get out of our company unless you really violate one of the sort of tenets that we have, things like showing up and being a part of the company and participating in the company, or we like our performers to show up sober, so that's really nice. And even then we'll give you a warning and say, hey, we're noticing this behavior and we really want you to participate, so get involved. And over the years, a couple of people have been asked to take a break, and sometimes they'll come back and sometimes they won't. But we have a really mature improv group, the likes of which the world really hasn't seen before.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
William, that's great. So if anyone out there, I mean, obviously you do a great deal of work with corporations and those kinds of clients. But if anyone out there wants to find your work or even hire you or possibly buy your book, where would they go on the internet to do those things?
Come see me perform at Bats Improv. That's improv.org, because we were around back then when they were giving away those big domain names. You can easily find me at fratellibologna.com, FRATELLIBOLOGNA.com, and Improv Games. It's a really easy site to remember when you're looking for some improv games. Go there.
And the name of the book again is?
Oh yeah, and I brought a copy for you.
Oh, thank you.
It's called The Playbook, Improv Games for Performers, and it's got over 350. Oh, and I brought you a couple of jokers.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, I collect jokers.
I had forgotten that you collected jokers.
Yeah.
Oh, these are really cool.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. I probably have about 3,000 different jokers. I've had to back off of collecting because I'm a little obsessive there.
I've been seriously considering starting collecting, which is a terrible idea, but...
Well, when you start, it's really, you just go to any thrift store and you're buying them for 25 cents a pack. So it's so easy. But go on eBay, and now you're getting some really cool decks for like $400. Wow. That's when I had to go, wait a minute, William.
So, one last thing.
Yeah.
Before we hit stop, if there were 3 other people that you think should be on this podcast, who would they be?
I think you should talk to somebody like Peter Berliner. He is a party planner, and he hires people for events. I think it'd be really interesting to hear his perspective about what he thinks about clowning.
Okay.
And why he hires clown. He called me up the other day. He says, "William, I need you guys. Give me who's doing what you do." And I said, "Nobody's doing what we did." And yeah, so we had to talk about that. Who else would I say? If you haven't had Drew Letchworth on, you should get Drew on.
I'd love to have Drew Letchworth on.
His perspective is lovely, crazy. But yeah, who else? Have you had Michael Sullivan on from the Mime Troupe?
I have not had Michael Sullivan.
Yeah,
He would also be an
I'd say
excellent guest.
call him. I'm suddenly aware that those are men. So, yeah, you've got Sarah Moore on though, right?
We've invited Sarah Moore.
Yeah. She's amazing. And Kelsey, has she been on?
No. Sent her a couple requests. I think she's coming back to the Bay Area soon, so I will hopefully be able to pin her down.
Patty Gallagher?
Patty, I've invited Patty. Patty has said yes. It's just a matter of scheduling at this point. So
yeah, it's a great career to visit, and it takes a lot of determination, a lot of drive, or a lot of psychosis to stay in the profession. To make a living at it.
Well, and as we discussed on this podcast many times, we talk a lot about the hustle of just trying to survive and get by, and a lot about what we end up doing instead.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teaching. There's a lot of producing. There's a lot of other things that end up paying the bills.
For a while, I thought of writing a book. My autobiography would be called "What I Wouldn't Do for a Couple $100." And I just didn't want to visit that territory anymore. I just didn't want to go there anymore. Well, next time we should talk about nightmare gigs and crazy gigs, because
oh god, yes,
that would be
absolutely.
Yeah, if we could get a bunch of us and just start chatting about crazy gigs.
Right.
You've had Frank Olivier on?
No.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of Frank Olivier. That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
All right, William, thank you very much for coming and being on the show.
Thanks for shaking my hand.
Thank you for joining us today on Ridiculous Life of a Clown. This program, as always, is made possible by your support through our Patreon, which you can find through www.picklewater.com. Also, please join us this coming January 27th, 2018 at 7 p.m. at Stageworks Theater in San Francisco for a huge circus gala featuring clowns, comedians, and burlesque dancers, all in benefit of Planned Parenthood. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.